And now, without further ado, we are going to have Donna come in. The description of her class is Growing Medicinal Herbs, the Hows and Whys with a focus on Echinacea. This class will discuss ways to choose medicinal herbs to grow and how to give herbs optimum growing conditions in the garden, and a few reasons why growing medicinal herbs is so important in these times. Yay! Welcome, Donna. So good to have you.
Thank you, Claudia. Well, I'm glad to be here as part of the Calendula Festival today, and thank you for your kind words. I was very inspired by Jocelyn's talk, and I know that the Herb Guild is going to learn a lot from her as well. So this is a class about growing medicinal herbs, and I've been talking about herbs for a long time, but this is my first online class, and it has been a steep learning curve. I want to thank Leslie King for coming and helping me get this going today. So these are very challenging times that we're in, but even so, there's so much that we can be grateful for. And I'd like to begin by offering a brief gratitude blessing. So if you'd like to close your eyes, we'll feel all of us being here at the same time. We give thanks for this beautiful place where we live and for the love of this place that unites us. We give thanks for the peace that we feel in this moment and for the hope with which we expect tomorrow. We give thanks for the food and the medicine plants and the spirit of community, all of which nourish our minds, bodies, and spirits. And we wish these blessings for people in every part of the earth. All right, so we're going to be talking about herbal medicine today. So I'd like to define that word medicine. The dictionary tells us that medicine is something that helps heal or cure. And I think of that as medicine with a small m. There's also medicine with a capital M. And that's a medicine that helps heal or cure, and it also benefits the whole. It is good for the earth and the entire web of life. So when I talk about medicine in this talk today, I am talking about medicine with a capital M. When you're thinking about growing your medicinal herb garden, a place to start is deciding what to grow. And a way to do that is to think about your family and your needs and your family's needs. So if you have, for example, small children and want to make medicine for them, you'd probably think about herbs like chamomile and lemon balm. And if you have in your family lots of scrapes and cuts and bruises from sports or carpentry or whatever, then you'd want to move more towards the healing herbs like calendula and yarrow and comfrey. And let's say you like to cook and you believe that food should be your medicine. Then all of the culinary herbs, dill and oregano, rosemary, thyme, they are all medicinal. There's also the possibility that you're just drawn to an herb. There's something about the color or the smell, something you've heard about it. That's a good place to begin as well. Once you have chosen your herb, you would want to learn about its native habitat. That's where it grows originally. These plants have been evolving for hundreds, if not thousands of years, creating chemical constituents to deal with everything around them, the soil, the air, the water or lack of it, insects, pathogens, pollinators. They are master chemists. And when we can give the plants the optimum growing conditions for that plant, then they are able to create those chemical constituents, that medicine that's for them and is good for us as well. It allows them to fully express themselves. I like that term, fully express themselves, because it reminds us that we're collaborating with the plants. We give them optimum growing conditions. They make the best medicine for themselves. And then, as it happens, that's very good medicine for us as well. So what the native habitat will tell you is the growing conditions. So that's exposure, how much sun, how much shade does a plant want, and water. Some plants like very little water, and some want a whole lot of water on a regular basis. It's also important to know the soil type. Some plants, for example, yarrow, like dry, rocky soil, and all the way to a marshy or boggy soil for a plant like yerba manza or marshmallow. It's helpful to know the size of the plant. How big is it going to get so that you know where to put it in your garden? And then, is the plant an annual that lives 1 year, a perennial that lives several to many years, or a biennial that just lives 2 years? There are many books that will help you with this information, and I've recommended a few that will be on the Guild website. There's one book for people who are just getting started. It's very simple. And then there's 2 books for farmers and gardeners who might want a little bit more detail. So check out the website. There's also additional suggestions for where to get medicinal herb seed and some other references as well. So let's look at our featured herb today, Echinacea. The native habitat of Echinacea is the prairies of the Plain States, which is the central part of the United States. That's Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, some parts of Appalachia. And these areas, plus a few places back east, are the only places in the world where there are wild populations of Echinacea. I'd like to give you a little history about this plant. The first people that we know that use this plant medicinally were the indigenous people, or the Native Americans of the central United States. And they had observed the elk seeking out Echinacea when they were sick or wounded. And they called it elk root and used it mostly for wounds and infections. And then when the white settlers came through, they learned about Echinacea from the Native Americans. And the information finally made its way to the eclectic doctors. They were the main physicians of that time from about 1850 to the early 1900s. And think of them as the first naturopaths. It was around 1890 that the first Echinacea roots were exported to Europe, and they have been exported, even the wild stands, since that time. So that's almost 100 years plus of being exported. And because of that, these wild populations of this plant are at risk and endangered. Well, it was when the demise of the naturopaths, the eclectic doctors, happened in the 1920s, the American Medical Association came through and herbs fell out of fashion, and Echinacea wasn't used much anymore until it was reintroduced into this country by Germany, where it had been studied extensively. So it has a rich history. And many people know this herb today as a plant that can stimulate the immune system. And it's taken at the beginning of a cold or flu. It's also used for wounds, for infections, for the stings and bites of poisonous insects and snakes. Has many, many uses. It's considered non-toxic, but it's not appropriate for people who have autoimmune conditions. But today we're going to focus on how to grow this plant. So what are the growing conditions that Echinacea wants? It needs full sun, but it can tolerate some shade. And if you have a very hot, dry garden, then go ahead and give it some shade. It appreciates regular watering, but it can also withstand a little bit of drought. Not fussy about soil, but the soil should be well draining. It's going to get about 2 or 3 feet tall, a couple of feet wide, and the spacing in the garden is usually about 12 to 18 inches. And it is a perennial that will die back to the ground in the winter. It is the third year roots of Echinacea that are used for medicine. Now, other important information to know about your herb is what part of it is medicinal and when do you harvest that part. So with Echinacea, all parts of the plant are medicinal. The leaves and the stems are the least medicinal. Then the young flower buds, the flowers in their prime, and the ripe, fresh seed, the next most medicinal. And finally, the roots, the most medicinal part of all. So 9 species of Echinacea exist. There's only 2 that are commonly used in medicine. And one is this plant here, which is Echinacea angustifolia. The species name, angustifolia, refers to the narrow leaf. This is a Echinacea species that can be used fresh or dried. The root can be used fresh or dried, but it's difficult to germinate. So many people, I'd say most herbalists and gardeners, grow this one, which is also this plant, which is Echinacea purpurea. The name purpurea refers to the color of the flower. It translates as purple, but as you can see, the flower is actually more of a deep pink than is purple. This root has to be used fresh, but it's also easy to germinate. So in the spring, you would take this seed and press it onto your garden soil or onto your flat that's going to go in the greenhouse or a little pot and lightly cover it with soil. Now that's important because Echinacea is what's called a light determinate germinator, which is basically means that if you cover it with too much soil, then it's not going to germinate. And you'll keep that wet until it germinates and starts to grow in your garden. Because we're in the first week of June right now, and you decide to grow Echinacea this year, then you'd probably want to start with a plant start like this and get that going. I would suggest to you that you grow several of whatever herb you decide to grow this year so that you can harvest a little bit from each of them and observe how it grows. If you grow several plants of Echinacea every year, then after 3 years, you'll have a constant supply of roots and aerial parts to make your medicine. So how can you use this plant? Once you have your second year plant and it's big enough to start harvesting, you could eat a leaf every day if you have enough. And you can also harvest the leaves and the flowers and the young buds and dry them for tea or infuse them in vinegar and make a nice tonic vinegar to use in cooking and on your salads. It is possible, because every part is medicinal, to make what's called a whole plant tincture. So, and after the second year, you would harvest a few of the leaves, the flower buds, and the flowers, and tincture them, being sure to leave enough plant matter to feed the roots of the plants that are still in the ground. And you keep that tincture going until fall, when you can harvest some of the fresh, ripe seeds and put that into your tincture as well. Set that aside when it's done. And in the late fall or early winter, and all the above ground parts have died back, that means the plant has put its energy back into the root. And you can harvest those roots, clean them real well, and pat them dry. And while they're still fresh, make a root tincture. And when they're done, Combine those two tinctures and you have a potent whole plant echinacea tincture. There are so many reasons why to grow medicinal herbs, and I just want to mention a few of them today. One reason is to help preserve the wild stands. As mentioned, echinacea has been hugely overharvested. It also has experienced lack of habitat, loss of habitat because of urban sprawl and farms. And we can really help this and other endangered plants by only buying the cultivated herb and buying products made with cultivated herbs. And that will allow these last wild populations to thrive. As we know, biodiversity is a key to the health of the whole ecosystems. Reason number 2, growing your own herbs is very economical. So for example, here's an echinacea tincture. In commerce, that costs about $10 to $15, depending on the brand. If you grow your own herbs, grow several of them, after 3 years, harvest those several plants, make a tincture, you can, for that same $10 or $15, instead of 1 ounce, you can make 10 to 12 ounces and really have a whole year's supply of medicine for your family. The third reason I'll mention is an important one. When you grow your own herbs, you have high quality herbs. You know everything about them. You know what was in the soil. You know how it was tended, how it was grown, if it was harvested correctly, how long it's been stored. Really important things to know about herbal medicine. If you think of skillfully crafted clothes or furniture versus mass-produced in a factory, that's the same balance with homegrown, homemade herbal medicines. There's a good story about Vasant Lad, Dr. Vasant Lad. He was one of the people who introduced herbal medicine, Ayurvedic herbal medicine in this country. And he used to do everything by hand, cutting the herbs, grinding them, chopping them. And someone asked him once, why is it that you don't use Cuisinarts and Vitamixes and so forth? And he said, if I used those machines, I wouldn't have time to put my prayers and my songs into the medicine. Now, when we buy raw herbs from our natural food stores, and I greatly appreciate the stores we have in our bioregion, that they are buying their herbs from one of the large bulk herb companies, wholesale. That could be Star West or Frontier Herbs. And those companies are getting their herbs from across the ocean. And there's so much we don't know about the quality of those herbs. Even if they're grown and certified organically, we don't know how they were stored, how old they are. We know nothing about how they were harvested. I have a Star West catalog here. And if we look on a page that lists bulk herbs, out of maybe a dozen herbs on one page, 2 of them will be from this country. The rest of them have come across the oceans from India, China, Egypt, Croatia, and we have no idea how long they've been here, how fresh or how old they are. I have a figure from the year 2013. In that year, $5.5 billion worth of herbal products, herbal supplements, and raw herbs were sold in this country. $5.5 billion in 1 year. 70% of those herbs came from across the ocean. We do have some some companies, especially up in Oregon, that sell locally grown herbs. There's Mountain Rose Herbs and Pacific Botanicals specifically. But there's great potential here for creating high quality medicinal herbs in Mendocino County for market. So the last reason I'm going to mention for growing medicinal herbs is the pleasure of being in the garden. Especially during these challenging times, being in the garden is a sanctuary. I'm sure a lot of gardeners out there would agree with me. It's a place of peace and focus and intention. There's a quote by Tagore about being in the garden. He lived in the 1800s in India, and he said, "The foolish run, the clever wait, the wise go into the garden." So in closing here, I want to encourage all of you to grow one medicinal herb this year, and several of that one if you can, and observe it over the year. See how it grows, see who pollinates it, develop a relationship with it. And if you can possibly, grow what I call a few of a few. Pick a few herbs and grow a few of each of them and observe them over the year. And next year, you may just want to grow a whole row of one that does well where you are and be part of this movement to grow high quality medicinal herbs for our bioregion. If you don't have a garden, if you're unable to garden this year, you can also always support one of the many local medicine companies. And you can check the Guild Herb site for a list of those, look at the marketplace today. You can go to the farmer's market and see many of those products there. We can all be part of this important and exciting endeavor to create local, sustainable, regenerative herbalism for our bioregion. And I want to wish you all great success in your gardens. And I would welcome any questions that you have.
My video. Yeah, Donna, can you hear
Yes.
me? Okay, yes, we have questions coming in. I just want to say, yeah, oh my God, your message is so important, and I hope it will resonate widely. So we have questions and comments. The question was, let me see now. Oh, where did it go? Ay, ay, ay. It had to do, how long do you have to wait before harvesting echinacea roots?
Oh, okay. So you generally want to wait 3 years. So the first year you seed it or you put in a plant start, and in the third fall, it has had enough time to concentrate its alkaloids so that it can fully express itself, as the expression goes, and really create its best medicine.
All right. Oh, the questions are coming in. So also, how do you feel about using echinacea year-round for an immune builder?
I am of the belief that there is no herb that we should use every day and 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The reason for that is many of these herbs, even the tonic herbs that gently move us towards health, are doing just that. They're gently nourishing and toning our body, but we want our bodies to remember how to do that themselves and not always have the crutch of this medicine. So what I do personally is I will use echinacea at the very, very first sign of being out of balance, usually a sore throat or a small cold coming on. Or if I know that I'm going to be in a stressful situation, stressful for me, like flying on an airplane or maybe being around a community of people who are not well, pardon me while that gets answered there, then I'll also take echinacea. So as we know, stress will dampen your immune system, but any herb that we take every day, day in, day out, is going to have less and less effect, even a tonic one. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very good. So another question is, if you have any tips on the market process, learning rules around selling herbs, packaging, etc.
Okay, well, in other words, how do you put your herbs on the market in a legal way? Is that the question? Okay.
I would assume, yeah.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that I have a small medicinal tincture business, and what I did about 30 years ago is I went into a natural food store and looked at tincture bottles and saw everything that was on there and wrote it down and used that as a reference. However, there are many, many websites now that can help you make sure that you've got legal labels, that you're doing everything in a way that meets the current standard. So I would use the internet for a reference.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Now, there's a question about, what do you recommend for thyroid herb?
Well, I am going to decline from any questions that talk about using herbs medicinally, because people are complicated, and it's not herbalism. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
So let me just back up and give you a perfect example. If someone calls me up and says, what would be a good herb for the immune system? Many people would think of this beautiful plant, echinacea. But without knowing that person, seeing that person, hearing their history, they might have an autoimmune condition. And that's why they are concerned about their immunity. And echinacea would not be appropriate. So I would recommend that you save that either for a practitioner, or perhaps ask Terry Turner today, who is an osteopath, who is a doctor and deals with herbs on a clinical basis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. It's really important. We are also individual. Now, in regard to echinacea, though, we have two more questions. One is kind of circling back to why echinacea is not good for suffering with autoimmune. And if there is a short answer to that, that would suffice. It depends if you want there.
Sure. So if echinacea stimulates our immune system, basically by stimulating the white blood cells, that's probably not something that you necessarily want to do with an autoimmune condition.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah. And here someone asked, could you share anything about the folklore stories of echinacea? Particularly interested in this plant's stories being endemic to our country. Thanks.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of lore around all of these plants, but one of the stories that I recall about echinacea has to do with when that information went from the indigenous people to the white settlers to the eclectics. And there was, as the story goes, there was a doctor named Dr. Earl Myers, and he was what we might think of as a snake oil salesman. He had his wagon with echinacea on there, and he would travel around, as the story goes, and allow himself in front of his crowd to be bit by a rattlesnake. And then he would take echinacea and survive, and apparently sell quite a bit of his tonic tincture. Well, I would say, don't try this at home, but echinacea came into favor largely as a snakebite remedy. One of its folk names is prairie snake root, because it is important to use in that way. I have a little snakebite kit at home, and rubber band onto it is a tincture of echinacea. And that is so, if someone was bit by a snake, I would take that whole 1 ounce tincture, drop it into a water bottle, and give it to the person to take nonstop as they were on their way to the hospital. So I hope that suffices as a little bit of the lore.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so I don't want to neglect to say there's actually several comments. Gratitude, Donna, thank you for the talk, and so forth. So people are with us. We have a lot of attendees right now. And actually someone is asking, wondering if Donna has a plan to teach herb classes at her home in the future, during the fall, next summer, anything that would be ready to be shared with us.
Well, I think right now, like many of us, I'm taking it just one day at a time, 1 week at a time. When we can gather back again, that's certainly a possibility. I also want to recommend that people check out the School of Adaptive Agriculture, which is on Ridgewood Ranch in the Willits area. They do a whole series of classes, some of them herbal. And if you check the Herb Guild website, there's a number of herb teachers on there. I'm hoping that we can get back together and actually be in each other's gardens, teaching and talking about herbs. That can't happen too soon for me.
Yeah.
But we want to do that in a safe way. And I'd just like to add something here, and that is appreciation for the Herb Guild. It's been just so heartening for me to see everyone come together in 3 years to create such an amazing organization. We have 3 generations of herbalists, and so much has happened in the last 3 years, so many events. It's really been such a beautiful thing for our community. So thank you all, to every person who helped make that happen, and to all of you who may want to come on board and be part of that in the future.
Yes, and in fact, several of the guild members actually have been teaching at the School of Adaptive Agriculture. Yeah. So there is a lot of collaboration happening. It's a beautiful thing. Again, for the interim time, it is certainly possible for anyone who's listening to come to the farmers market and talk to the ladies mostly at the guild stand, because we are everywhere. So that is what we can offer now. And actually, Donna and everybody who's listening, there's something else that's coming down. Very exciting. So first of all, Donna, your tinctures are at our local health food store, our precious Mariposa Market. And Mariposa Market now has officially opened up an opportunity for local herbs grown and kind of sorted through the guild to be offered in their herb area. And as soon as we're wrapping up the Calendula Festival, we are on it. So it will happen in stages, but for all those who cannot grow, you know, a lot of different herbs and just would like to have a particular herb in their life, they can't grow, but they want it locally grown, because you so wonderfully pointed out, this is so important to realize the difference between local grown and who knows from where they come. We'll be having locally grown herbs in Mariposa very soon. So
that is very, very exciting. And I want to mention a couple more sources. Snow Mountain Botanicals is a local, in our bioregion in Mendocino County, grows most of the herbs that they use in their tinctures. And they're also at all the natural food stores. And a really excellent source. And it's good to remember that your medicine will be as good as the potency and the quality of the herb itself. So we have a lot of potential here to create some high quality medicine.
Yeah. And I'm also grateful you mentioned again, people can go to the website and see if they want to be part of this movement. We're going to call it a movement now, because we're certainly moving to partake in whatever fits for them best. Not everybody has 2 acres to grow herbs, but just to be in touch with the spirit of communicating and using this incredible goodness what the herbs offer to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Donna, are you up for a few more questions?
Sure.
Okay. Just 1 or 2 of really good herbs to support the bees in this area.
Mm. So I think of borage as a great bee plant, and certainly lemon balm. Lemon balm's Latin name, Melissa, actually means bees. And I understand from beekeepers that sometimes they rub that plant on the hive to keep the bees happy. And where I live, we have, over the years, grown a lot of rosemary. Uh, so many reasons for growing rosemary, but one of them is that it flowers several times during the year.
Right.
And it's one of the earliest flowers that's available in early spring for the bees. Our wild bees are there 3 or 4 or 5 times a year when the rosemary's flowering.
Yeah, that
So I
makes so much
recommend those
sense.
3.
Yes,
Yeah.
because in different stages we can provide food for them naturally. That's fantastic. Yeah. So is there any recommendation for plants that would really thrive in a shady garden?
Yeah, there's some plants that do well in the shade. I think of figwort,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the mints will do well in the shade.
Yeah.
Black elderberry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's all that come to mind right now.
No,
But
that's wonderful, because since you
yeah,
mentioned elderberry, we just had a new question come in.
sure.
Can Donna talk about the difference between elderberry and echinacea?
The difference between them. Well, one is a small tree, and one is a plant about 2 or 3 feet. The medicine of them is somewhat different. Elderberry, it's the berry that's used medicinally, and it's an antiviral. And that is one that I put into a syrup or into wine, infuse it in wine, or you could even make a wine out of it and take that more as a food than a particular medicine. Start taking it in the fall, just before flu season comes on. I know there's a bit of a controversy going around about using it for COVID, and that's a very complicated subject. I would refer people to a website by Stephen Buhner.
Yeah.
That's Buhner. He's a brilliant herbalist. He's a researcher, and he has a lot to say on that subject.
Yeah, that's a great reference. Yes, it's mind-boggling. Yeah, fascinating though. Yes. So this is also so reassuring. There are people out there who really go deep in understanding what phytonutrients can do for us and with us. It's fascinating. Now, a little different question, but nevertheless really important. When people in this county go out and what we say wild craft, are there any medicinal herbs that are actually endangered?
Yes, if I reference the United Plant Savers, which is a great organization that has been working for about 30 years now to educate people about endangered herbs, I think it's the contact information is on the Herb Guild website.
Yeah.
So they have a list of herbs that are at risk, that's at risk of becoming extinct. And then they also have a list of herbs to watch that need to be definitely kept track of to make sure that doesn't happen. And one of the herbs that we have that's on the at-risk list is trillium.
Okay.
Trillium is a plant that grows in the understory, beautiful plant. And it has been used in times past to stimulate uterine contractions during the birthing process. But there are so many herbs that could be used in its place that trillium is no longer harvested. tell you one other thing about Trillium. It takes 7 years for its seed to form, 7 years before the plant produces seed. Then that seed needs to drop off. It is picked up by ants who take it back to their nest, where a certain bacteria or fungus has to be available to break down the seed coating, and then it will sprout. So when we think about an herb like that has such a process to repopulate itself versus, say, something like Echinacea that's easy to grow, that we realize that there's no reason whatsoever to harvest Trillium. On the to watch list are several herbs that we have here. Lomatium, even though it doesn't grow in Mendocino County that I know of, it grows in Sonoma County. And Yerba Santa is another one. And although I have enough Yerba Santa where I live for Northern California, in some places it is at risk. So I think that's a good point in that it's where all the wild stands are. And one of the reasons we don't want to wildcraft unless it's on our own personal property or someplace that we know well is because we need to tend these plants. We need to know how they're doing, how many people have come through and harvested them, and so forth and so on. So I hope that answers a very large
it's
question.
wonderful. I think discernment is really important. Yes, yes. And this has all to do with sustainability in the larger sense. We want these plants to come back every year for, however long they want to do this. So yeah, we want to respect such long cycles of 7 years. That's very impressive. Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, and there are a number of herbs that are at risk or to watch that we can have analogues for. That is something to use instead.
Yes.
And I'll give you a quick example. We have a forest plant called coyote ear or hound's tongue. And it has some of the same medicinal properties as comfrey root. And comfrey root is probably one of the easiest plants there is to grow. It's much more difficult to get rid of it than it is to grow it.
Yes.
So there really is no good reason to harvest plants in the wild when we have something that works equally as good that we can easily plant in a harvest.
Yeah, and that makes also sense for other plants which would then be shipped from who knows where. If we have a local analog that's not endangered,
yes,
we really should, embrace that option. And if anybody has comfrey, we have an incredible local source of comfrey. So that's, again, it's great that the guild is in existence because this is where all the questions can come in. And if you're looking for something, we may be able to put people and plants together.
Yeah, to that end, I would mention that for the next couple of weeks, the Herb Guild in the various farmers markets, certainly Willits and Ukiah, will have medicinal herb starts for sale. They'll have a selection there. So if you want to go in that direction, check that out.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, one last question which came in, and it has to do with Arnica. The question is, can we grow it here? What are the conditions? Is that a good idea? What is your suggestion there?
Arnica montana, which is classically the one that's used for medicine, grows at about 5,000 feet in the mountains. That's what montana references. And that one is actually on the to watch list. I think the closest place we have that is Snow Mountain. But there is an Arnica species that we can grow here, and it does very well. It's called Arnica chamassonus, and Chamossines. So that actually likes average soil. Once it gets going, it kind of spreads like a mint. So go ahead and give it a lot of room. And then instead of harvesting just the flowers, which is what's often done, you can harvest the whole above ground parts, all of the aerial parts, and make your medicines from that. So a good place for seed, again, check the resource list on my class outline, but strictly medicinal seeds in Oregon. And we also have a great local herb seed company called Quail Herbs, Quail Seeds.
Quail seeds, right. Yeah, awesome local company. That's right. Yes, thanks for mentioning that. You're very good. Yeah. Donna, last but not least, we're going to have one more question coming in. How can I get my plants to the community? Harvesting lemon balm and others right now. Now that I think we already touched on, how can I get my plants to the community? Would you like to answer that?
I'm assuming that they're meaning, how can I get my raw herbs to someone who can use them? Is that the question?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, what I would do probably is check with the Herb Guild.
Yes.
There's a place to send in questions and see if there is a medicine maker, a small herbal medicine company that might have need of your herb, and interface with them directly. I'm going to guess that with lemon balm, most people will already have that in their gardens because it's a mint and likes to take over. Mm-hmm. But again, the guild would be a good place to begin by asking who is in need of what.
In fact, the guild is a good place to ask because we do have a system set up that local herbal preparations can be funneled through the guild into the farmers markets. So yes, the guild is the place to ask. Now, love Donna. Thank you, Donna, so much. Thank you, Donna. Wonderful. Gratitude, Donna. So yay, Donna. Donna, I just want to, join the course. Thank you, Donna, for being with us today, for everything you've done for all these years. You have really, really changed people's lives, as I mentioned before, and I'm not kidding. And I'm grateful. We are all grateful for everything you do, and we can't wait for all the years to come to see what else you will share with us, because your knowledge and wisdom, I mean, there is no end to it. I mean, we could just sit around with you and learn every time we just listen to you. Thank you, Donna. Thank you very much for being here.
You're welcome. I will say it's been my absolute pleasure to be an herbalist and to be part of this community. And one of the wonderful things about herbs is you'll never stop learning. There's always more to know and more connection to make with the plants.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye-bye.